Just imagine that a colony who built their entire city for their good life suddenly vanish.
Scientists have made a breakthrough that reshapes what we have come to know about ancient America. New DNA analysis has revealed surprising truths about Aztec origins, details that, until now, mainstream history has overlooked. For years, Hancock argued that the Americas were shaped by multiple migrations and lost civilizations.
So it's considered to be the earliest high culture of Central America. Everybody's heard about the Aztecs.
Not a single wave of settlers. Could the latest genetic findings support his claims? Who were the Aztecs? The answer is far more complex than textbooks suggest.
The Aztecs have created one of the most sophisticated civilizations on the planet.
Their DNA carries mysterious signatures that hint at vanished societies and connections spanning continents, forcing us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about their place in history. The mystery that started it all. In 2025, the world marks 700 years since the Aztecs founded their magnificent capital, Tenochtitlan. For generations, historians offered a straightforward tale of their past. The Aztecs, like all indigenous peoples of the Americas, were said to have come from Asia, crossing a land bridge some 15,000 years ago, before gradually spreading across the continent. And for centuries, that was considered the end of the story. The mainstream view claimed that after crossing from Asia, these early Americans spent thousands of years as simple hunters and gatherers. No cities, no pyramids, no writing systems. Nothing remarkable until suddenly, the Aztecs appear in 1325 AD with incredible knowledge and power. Scientists have been scratching their heads about this for decades. How did the Aztecs suddenly become so powerful? Where did their incredible knowledge come from? Their pyramids, their calendar, their understanding of astronomy. It all seemed to appear out of nowhere. Famous researcher Hancock has been saying for years that mainstream history got it wrong. He believes there were multiple waves of people coming to America, not just one. Each wave brought new knowledge, new skills, and new genetic advantages that shaped who would rule the Americas. Now, the latest DNA reports are proving he was right all along. Genetic analysis reveals that American history wasn't one slow, steady development. It was a series of dramatic migrations, conquests, and replacements that happened over thousands of years. The DNA analysis doesn't just fill in gaps, it completely changes the picture. What scientists found in the genetic code of ancient Americans will shock you, because the story of who the Aztecs really were involves vanished civilizations, mysterious genetic signatures, and connections spanning 2 entire continents. The vanishing act that defied science. Long before the Aztecs ruled Mexico, there were the Olmecs, people who built massive stone heads that still puzzle archaeologists today. The Olmecs created the first major civilization in America around 1500 BC. They had writing, built pyramids, and created art that looks like it came from another world. Their civilization lasted over 1,000 years, dominating the Gulf Coast of Mexico during the 2nd millennium BC. They developed complex trade networks.
But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs.
Created the first ball courts and established religious practices that influenced every civilization that followed. But when scientists tried to trace their DNA, they found nothing. It was as if the Olmecs had vanished into thin air. No Y chromosome echo, no mitochondrial DNA signature. For a civilization that thrived for over 1,000 years and shaped the entire region, such an absence defies logic. As one researcher put it, a people that left colossal heads carved from stone should have left something in the genome. The silence is louder than evidence unless something happened that we don't yet understand. No genetic footprint remains of them, no cousins, no distant relatives, not even the faintest echo in the DNA record. That, astonishingly, is what became of the Olmecs. Every other ancient group left genetic traces that scientists can follow today.
Ancient Olmec artifacts with mysterious markings re-examined. New discoveries suggest broader writing system pattern.
Their genetic lineages completely vanished from the modern Native American population. This Olmec mystery becomes even more important when you realize what happened next. Archaeological evidence shows that by 400 BC, Olmec civilization had completely collapsed. Their cities were abandoned, their trade networks dissolved, and their people seemingly disappeared. But just as the Olmecs were fading away, new groups were arriving in America from Asia. These newcomers carried with them something the Olmecs left no trace of: distinct DNA signatures that endure to this day in modern Native American populations. Unlike the vanished genetic silence of the Olmecs, their markers form a living thread, binding the present to a deep and traceable past. The timing wasn't an accident. The arrival of these new groups changed everything about who would rule America, and it set the stage for a pattern of conquest and replacement that would happen again and again. The genetic evidence suggests that the Olmecs weren't just outcompeted, they were completely replaced. Their DNA lineages didn't mix with the newcomers, they vanished entirely. What happened to the Olmecs was dramatic and final. The Maya invasion nobody saw coming. While the Olmecs were still building their mysterious civilization, something incredible was happening in Guatemala. New people were arriving from Northeast Asia, and they brought revolutionary ideas with them. This wasn't the original migration everyone talks about. This was something completely different that would change American history forever. DNA analysis shows these newcomers arrived around 1000 BC, and they weren't just wandering hunters. They immediately started building one of the most advanced civilizations the world had ever seen. The Maya didn't slowly develop their culture over thousands of years like the old story claimed. They hit the ground running with sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and architecture. Female inherited mitochondrial DNA provides an unmistakable clock, revealing exactly when this migration took place. Scientists can trace the influx directly to the rise of Mayan civilization in the Guatemalan lowlands. It is in effect a genetic timestamp, evidence that aligns strikingly with Graham Hancock's long-debated theories about multiple waves of migration shaping the Americas.
It's considered to be the earliest high culture of Central America. Everybody's heard about the Aztecs. Everybody's heard about the Maya.
The genetic signature emerges in the archaeological record at the very moment pre-classic Mayan society began to flourish. As one geneticist remarked, "It is rare in science to see history and DNA converge so precisely. But here, the genomes and the ruins speak in unison." But the Maya didn't just settle peacefully alongside the Olmecs. Evidence suggests they competed for the same territory, the same resources, the same control over trade routes. And slowly but surely, the Maya started winning this ancient competition for dominance. The pre-classic Mayan period, starting around 1000 BC, saw rapid development of cities, writing systems, and monumental architecture. These weren't simple farmers figuring things out slowly. They were sophisticated people who understood complex engineering, created accurate calendars, and built cities that rival anything in the ancient world. This means that the Olmecs had been the rulers of Mexico for over 500 years. They seemed unstoppable with their massive stone monuments and far-reaching influence. But these new arrivals from Asia brought something different. Maybe new technologies, new ways of organizing society, or new spiritual beliefs that gave them an advantage. By 400 BC, the Olmecs were completely gone. Not defeated in battle, not absorbed into other cultures, but gone. Their DNA lineages vanished as if they never existed. Meanwhile, the Maya were building cities that would last for centuries and developing one of the most sophisticated writing systems in the ancient world. This pattern of arrival, competition, and replacement would happen again and again in ancient America. Each time, it would reshape who held power and who got to write history. When giants walked among pyramids. Just when you think the Maya had secured their place as rulers of ancient America, another twist appears in the genetic record. Around 100 BC, something incredible was happening in central Mexico that would dwarf even the Maya achievements. A new city was growing bigger and more powerful than anything anyone had seen before, Teotihuacan. At its peak between 100 and 700 AD, Teotihuacan housed up to 200,000 people. The city covered 8 square miles and contained more than 2,000 apartment compounds. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is the third largest pyramid in the world. The city's main avenue, called the Avenue of the Dead, stretches for over 2 miles and is wider than most modern highways. These weren't simple buildings. They were massive engineering projects that required advanced knowledge and organizational skills. Scientists didn't just stumble on this revelation, they pieced it together from fragments of ancient DNA preserved in teeth and bones around Teotihuacan. Using mitochondrial DNA analysis, they compared these sequences to those of modern populations, tracing maternal lineages back thousands of years. The results revealed that, at the very moment the city entered its explosive growth phase, a distinct group of migrants arrived from Northeast Asia. These were not the same people who became the Maya, but newcomers carrying a unique genetic signature. The timing is too precise to be coincidence. In the genetic record, researchers can literally watch their arrival, strangers stepping into the Valley of Mexico and almost immediately constructing the foundations of the greatest city in pre-Columbian America. They did not slowly evolve from local populations. They came with knowledge and skills that enabled something unprecedented. As one geneticist remarked, the DNA told the story before the history books could even catch up. And just like with the Maya and Olmecs before them, these Teotihuacanos didn't just mind their own business. DNA reports show they expanded their influence far beyond their massive city. They conquered parts of the Mayan territories, spreading their genetic lineage into Guatemala and beyond. Archaeological evidence shows Teotihuacano influence reaching as far south as modern-day Honduras. The evidence is written in the genes of modern Maya people, and it tells a shocking story of conquest and replacement. Only 15% of today's Maya carry the original Mayan DNA lineage that we saw arrive around 1000 BC. A massive 75% carry the genetic signature of the Teotihuacanos. This means the people of Teotihuacan didn't just influence Maya culture, they literally became the Maya through genetic mixing and replacement. But if Teotihuacan was so powerful, so advanced, so successful at spreading across Mexico and Guatemala, what happened to them? Why don't we see their massive cities dominating Mexico today? The burning of the greatest city. In the 600s AD, disaster struck Teotihuacan. Archaeological evidence shows the city was violently destroyed, burned to the ground by unknown attackers. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash and rubble, and roughly 200,000 people lost their homes, temples, and way of life in a single catastrophic event. Sacred buildings were deliberately targeted, suggesting organized conquest rather than random violence. DNA analysis offers a chilling clue. Just before Teotihuacan fell, another wave of migrants arrived from Asia, bringing warrior traditions and military technologies that gave them decisive advantages. The oldest Y chromosome lineage still found in Native Americans dates precisely to this period. These newcomers didn't just conquer Teotihuacan, they spread rapidly across Mexico, leaving genetic markers that endured while earlier populations vanished. Step back, and a pattern emerges. Wave after wave of migrants from Asia established lasting lineages. The Olmecs left no trace. The original Maya were largely replaced. Even the mighty Teotihuacanos lost their male lineages entirely. Each conquest followed the same brutal pattern, complete replacement of male populations, while some female lineages persisted through intermarriage. What made these latest arrivals different? Why did their DNA signatures survive when so many others disappeared? The answer lies in understanding that they weren't just random migrants. They were the ancestors of people who would eventually call themselves Aztecs. They carried superior organizational skills and military strategies that allowed them to not just conquer, but maintain control over vast territories. According to the Aztecs' own historical records, their story begins in AD 635, the very moment this final wave of Asian migrants arrived, just as Teotihuacan was collapsing. The precision of the timing is striking, leaving little doubt that it was no mere coincidence. These weren't separate events happening by chance. The arrival of the Aztec ancestors and the fall of Teotihuacan were connected, and the genetic evidence proves it beyond doubt. The Toltec connection. After Teotihuacan burned and the classic Maya collapsed around 900 AD, a new power emerged from the ashes.
Lan simply means city or the city. It's a site that's older than the Aztec. It goes back at least as far as what we call the Toltec civilization.
The Toltecs rose to control central Mexico. The Aztecs always spoke of the Toltecs with incredible respect, calling them their greatest ancestors. They claimed the Toltecs taught them everything from architecture to astronomy, from warfare to governance. But were the Toltecs actually related to the Aztecs, or was this just political propaganda? DNA analysis finally gives us the answer, and it's more complex than anyone expected. The genetic evidence reveals a direct bloodline connection that validates the Aztec claims about their heritage. The genetic evidence shows that the Toltecs carried the same Asian lineages that arrived just before Teotihuacan's fall. They weren't a completely separate people. They were part of the same wave of migrants that brought down the previous civilizations. This means the Aztecs weren't just honoring random predecessors. They were honoring their actual genetic relatives. Mitochondrial DNA analysis shows that Toltec women carried the same genetic markers found later in Aztec populations, proving continuous genetic inheritance. As one geneticist remarked, the Toltecs were not strangers in the lineage. They were a living bridge connecting the past to the Aztec present. The Toltecs ruled Mexico for roughly 300 years. During this time, they spread their influence across central Mexico, and possibly even into Maya territories on the Yucatan Peninsula. Everywhere they went, they left behind the same genetic signatures that scientists now find in Aztec populations. Archaeological evidence shows Toltec settlements stretched from the Pacific coast to the Gulf of Mexico, creating a vast network of genetically related communities. The Toltecs developed sophisticated trade networks that connected distant regions, spreading not just goods, but genetic lineages across hundreds of miles. Their capital at Tallinn became a center of learning and culture that influenced every subsequent Mexican civilization. DNA reports show that Toltec genetic markers appear in populations as far north as present-day Arizona and as far south as Guatemala. When the Toltec Empire finally collapsed around 1200 AD, their people didn't disappear like the Olmecs had. Instead, they scattered across the region, carrying their DNA and their cultural knowledge with them. Some groups settled in different parts of Mexico, while others kept moving, searching for a new place to build their ideal city. These scattered Toltec groups maintained their genetic identity through careful marriage practices and tribal affiliations. One of these groups had a vision, a prophecy that told them to look for an eagle sitting on a cactus, eating a snake. When they found this sign, they would know they had found their promised land. That group would eventually call themselves the Mexica, though history knows them better as the Aztecs.
But then one of their priests say, we're going to walk around the lake, and my visions say that where we see an eagle sitting on a cactus with a snake in its mouth is where we will build our capital.
The DNA evidence proves that when the Aztecs founded Tenochtitlan in 1325 AD, they weren't starting from scratch. They were the inheritors of genetic lineages and cultural knowledge that stretched back through the Toltecs, through the destroyers of Teotihuacan, all the way to the Asian migrants who had arrived 700 years earlier. Bloodlines that spanned 2 continents. But the genetic lineages that they found in the Aztecs didn't just stay in Mexico. They spread from the Arctic to the tip of South America, creating a genetic highway that connected the entire Western Hemisphere. This discovery proves that ancient America was far more connected than anyone imagined, with genetic networks spanning over 10,000 miles. Scientists studying mitochondrial DNA made an incredible discovery. The same genetic signature found in Teotihuacano populations shows up in native Arctic peoples thousands of miles to the north. These are people living in completely different environments, speaking different languages, following different customs. The genetic markers are so similar that scientists initially thought there was contamination in their samples. But it gets even more startling. The Mayan mitochondrial DNA lineage shows up in indigenous peoples of Chile and Argentina, at the very bottom of South America, genetic connections spanning from pole to pole. DNA analysis reveals that some South American populations share up to 80% genetic similarity with ancient Maya populations, despite being separated by thousands of miles in different climates. This means that before Europeans ever set foot in America, there was already a complex network of related peoples stretching across 2 entire continents. The Aztecs weren't just rulers of central Mexico. They were connected to a genetic family that dominated the entire New World. Trade routes, migration paths, and cultural exchanges created genetic corridors that allowed DNA signatures to spread across vast distances over centuries. Graham Hancock has long argued that ancient civilizations were more connected than mainstream archaeology admits.
But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs.
The DNA analysis proves he was absolutely right. These weren't isolated groups developing separately. They were part of a vast network of related peoples who shared common origins and possibly common knowledge. This rewrites history. Genetic evidence suggests coordinated migrations and planned settlements rather than random wandering across the continents. Archaeological sites across the Americas show similar construction techniques, artistic styles, and religious symbols that make sense only if there were active communication networks between distant populations. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1519, they thought they were encountering a small, isolated empire. They had no idea they were actually facing the genetic descendants of people who had relatives from Alaska to Argentina. The Aztecs weren't just local rulers. They were the inheritors of a continental legacy. This gene sheds light on why certain civilizations succeeded while others failed. It wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time. It was about being connected to a vast network of related peoples who could share knowledge, resources, and innovations across incredible distances. The genetic evidence through the DNA report shows that successful civilizations maintained these long-distance connections, while isolated groups tended to disappear from the genetic record. The DNA evidence that shocked scientists. When scientists first started studying ancient American genetics, they expected to find one simple story: a single group of people who came from Asia and slowly spread across the continents. Researchers were working under the assumption that genetic diversity in the Americas would be limited and straightforward to trace. What they found instead was completely different. Multiple distinct waves of migration, each leaving their own genetic signature, each arriving at crucial moments in American history. And the Aztecs were the genetic inheritors of the most successful of these migrations. The complexity of the genetic data required entirely new analytical methods and computer models to understand the patterns. The Y chromosome DNA tells an especially dramatic story. The Olmecs left no genetic trace, and the same fate befell the original Maya male lineages, as well as the men of Teotihuacan. Their Y chromosomes vanished completely from the genetic record, but the Y chromosome lineages that arrived just before Teotihuacan's fall survived and spread. Scientists discovered that modern Native American men carry Y chromosome markers that are no more than 1,400 years old, meaning all older male lineages were completely eliminated. This means the Aztec men weren't descended from the ancient civilizations that came before them. They were descended from the people who replaced those civilizations. The genetic evidence shows a pattern of conquest and replacement that happened over and over again in pre-Columbian America. The DNA reveals systematic elimination of existing male populations, while female lineages were partially preserved through intermarriage. But while the male lineages from earlier civilizations disappeared, some of the female lineages survived and mixed with the newcomers. The mitochondrial DNA shows that Aztec women carried genetic heritage from multiple waves of migration. Female genetic diversity in Aztec populations was 3 times higher than male diversity, indicating complex patterns of conquest and integration. Advanced DNA sequencing techniques revealed that Aztec origin populations contained genetic markers from at least 4 different Asian source populations, arriving at different time periods. This mixing created something new, a people who combined the genetic strengths of multiple Asian migrations with the accumulated cultural knowledge of all the civilizations that had risen and fallen in Mexico. The Aztecs weren't just another group of migrants. They were the genetic and cultural inheritors of thousands of years of American history. The DNA reports prove that by the time the Aztecs founded Tenochtitlan, they represented the successful fusion of multiple genetic lineages and cultural traditions. They were, in a very real sense, the ultimate Americans, carrying the heritage of everyone who had come before them. This will rewrite history, because the DNA evidence shows that the Aztecs were not simply one isolated empire, but the inheritors of a continental legacy, stretching from Alaska to Argentina. What this really means. The DNA analysis gives us a shocking answer that validates everything Graham Hancock has been saying about ancient migrations and lost civilizations. The Aztecs were not the descendants of a single ancient migration. They were the genetic inheritors of the last successful wave of Asian migrants to reach America before Columbus. These people arrived around 635 AD, just as the previous great civilizations were collapsing, and they carried with them the genetic keys to success in the New World. This explains everything that seemed mysterious about Aztec civilization. Their sudden rise to power wasn't sudden at all. It was the culmination of genetic lineages that had been selected for success over hundreds of years. Their advanced knowledge wasn't developed in isolation. It was inherited from the accumulated wisdom of multiple civilizations. The DNA evidence shows that when the Aztecs built Tenochtitlan, they were creating more than just another city. They were establishing the capital of a genetic empire that stretched from the Arctic to Argentina. They ruled not just through military might, but through genetic connections that linked them to peoples across 2 continents. Graham Hancock was right about multiple migrations reshaping ancient America. He revealed who the Aztecs really were. The DNA analysis proves that the story of human settlement in the Americas was far more complex and dramatic than mainstream archaeology ever admitted. Wave after wave of people arrived from Asia, each group bringing new genetic advantages that allowed them to outcompete those who came before. The Aztecs were the final winners in this genetic competition, the inheritors of the most successful lineages from multiple migrations. When Cortés arrived in 1519, he wasn't just conquering an isolated empire. He was ending a genetic dynasty that had dominated the Western Hemisphere for nearly 1,000 years. This DNA evidence will rewrite history. It proves that ancient America was connected, dynamic, and constantly changing. Exactly what researchers like Graham Hancock have been trying to tell us all along. What other secrets do you think are hidden in ancient DNA? And which lost civilization would you want scientists to study next? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.